Georg Friedrich Handel was born on February 23, 1685, in Halle, Saxony. With no musical tradition in his family, he was the first son of a barber and surgeon, in his 60s and remarried. His interest in music, perhaps innate, was fostered by a maternal aunt, and he began his studies at Friedrich Wilhelm Zachau's music school at the early age of 8, against the wishes of his father, who preferred to direct him toward the study of law. After his father's death in 1697, Handel continued to advance his musical knowledge, although in 1702, following his father's repeated wishes, he began studying law at the University of Halle. By the age of 17, he had become an accomplished organist, holding the position of principal organist at the cathedral of his hometown. Restless and enterprising, Handel, at the age of 18, abandoned Halle, his law studies, and his current musical position and headed to the cosmopolitan and musical city of Hamburg, where he readily accepted a modest position as a violinist in the opera orchestra at the Gansemarkt Theater. It was there that he received his first and decisive exposure to the operatic genre, which would shape his career as a composer for most of his life. Also during those years in Hamburg, he struck up a close friendship with the multifaceted musician and composer Johann Mattheson, with whom he nevertheless had heated disputes motivated by inevitable professional jealousy. One of these disputes led them to challenge each other in duel, although, fortunately, neither was injured, ending in mutual reconciliation. In 1704, Handel wrote his first oratorio, the St. John Passion, followed by the opera Almira. In 1706, he abruptly decided to leave Hamburg and head for Italy, accepting the request of the great patron of music, Gian Gaston de Médicis. His first stay was in Venice, but he soon settled in Florence, the destination and workplace of many composers interested in sacred and theatrical music, and where he was later commissioned to write an opera, Roderigo, at the behest of the Médicis themselves. He left for Rome in 1707, where he found the fervent support of the city's highest dignitaries. However, in Rome, he was unable to write any operas due to a 5-year ban on the genre, so he devoted himself entirely to sacred and secular music outside of any theatrical context. From this period date the oratorios The Resurrection of Our Lord Jesus Christ and The Triumph of Time, whose premieres were conducted by the veteran and great maestro Arcangelo Corelli. After a brief stay in Naples in 1708, Handel returned to Rome in 1709, the year in which he met the eminent composer and diplomat Agostino Steffani, who offered him the position of successor as Kapellmeister at the court of Hanover, a position then held by Steffani, also an abbot. Back in Venice, Handel set his own earlier compositions to music for a libretto by Vincenzo Grimani, Viceroy of Naples. The resulting opera, Agrippina, premiered at the Teatro S. Giovanni Crisostomo on December 26, 1709, established him as one of Europe's greatest and most acclaimed composers of Italian opera. After a stay in Hanover as Kapellmeister to George Louis, Elector of that city, Handel, with the latter's permission, traveled to Dusseldorf and then to London, arriving in the autumn of 1710. Through Jacob Heidegger, manager of the Queen's Theatre, the composer gained access to the most influential circles of London society. There, he presented his third Italian opera, Rinaldo, which premiered on February 24, 1711, and was an unprecedented success that spread his fame throughout the islands. His obligatory returns to Hanover, where his operatic activity had declined, and his desire to remain in London caused some displeasure among Elector George Louis. Upon his return to that city, he premiered, without success, Il Pastor Fido Anne, to better reviews. Tessia. He also composed some works linked to the British monarchy, such as Ode for Queen Anne's Birthday and the Te Deum of Utrecht, for which he was granted an annual pension of £200, which increased Handel's doubts about the advisability of returning to Hanover, where, nevertheless, he remained committed. Fate, however, favored the composer. As Queen Anne died in August 1714, the Elector of Hanover was named his successor, who would reign as George I. Although the king remained distant toward the composer during the first 2 years due to his disloyal behavior regarding his duties in Hanover, he eventually put his great worth above all else, once again accepting his invaluable services and increasing his pension to £600. Except for very occasional and insignificant trips, Handel remained in England until his death. In 1719, at the king's own urging, The Royal Academy of Music was founded with the mission of providing Italian operas to the King's Theatre. Handel was at its head, sharing the honors with Bononcini and Ariosti. This academy maintained its splendor for 9 consecutive seasons, during which Handel premiered as many as 14 operas, including such important titles as Radamisto, 1720, Giulio Cesare 1724, and Scipione, 1726. However, the Academy was eventually dissolved in June 1728 due to serious disagreements among its singers and certain political intrigues. A second Academy was founded by Handel, in conjunction with the impresario J. Heidegger, and he managed to keep it active for the following 4 years, between 1729 and 1733. During that period, he composed 6 more operas. Once again, disputes among the singers led to the dissolution of the Academy, which, with its diminished capacity, had to compete with another academy supported by the nobility and the famous castrati Fanninelli. This open warfare ended with the ruin of both, and Handel's own assets were severely affected, enduring serious difficulties in the following years. In 1737 the composer suffered a stroke that left him briefly impaired, recovering fully after a cure in Aachen. The following years were marked by both successes and resounding failures, the latter of which led him to abandon opera for oratorio. During his stay in Dublin in 1741, at the invitation of the Duke of Devonshire, he composed his most famous oratorio, Messiah, which restored him much of his lost fame, followed by Samson. Handel's subsequent years were abundant in output, although his health suffered another setback during them, and a good number of his masterpieces date from these years, such as Belshazzar, 1744, Judas Maccabeus, 1746, Solomon, 1748, and Jephthah, 1751. In the year he was composing this last oratorio, Handel was forced to undergo cataract surgery, which left him almost completely blind. Over the following years, his activity declined, but continued, as he was assisted by his disciple J.C. Smith. He died on April 14, 1759, and was buried a few days later in Westminster Abbey.
Messenger of the covenant, we delight him. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. There's